Rupert and James Murdoch were quizzed for over 3 hours by the Home Affairs Committee on July 19th. As the scandal grows bigger by the day, Prime Minister David Cameron cut short his visit to hold a special debate on the entire phone hacking saga. He explains his proximity to the top brass of the news of the world.
Barely 14 months into office and British Prime Minister is facing his biggest challenge yet. As the phone hacking scandal lurches dangerously close to 10 Downing Street, with former police chief Sir Paul Stephenson even comparing the Metropolitan hiring former News of the World deputy editor to the Prime Minister hiring former editor Andy Coulson.
I was trying to make something absolutely clear, and that was, and I do agree with the Prime Minister when he says this was entirely different. Of course the employment of Mr Coulson and the employment by the Met of Mr Wallace was entirely different. And can I just correct an inaccuracy here? Mr Wallace was never employed to be my personal assistant or provide personal advice to me.
What has hurt David Cameron more are the revelations that his chief of staff prevented the Scotland Yard from briefing the Prime Minister on the entire murky saga.
Prime Minister's chief of staff about the offer that you talked about, was any reason given for declining that offer?
When I say a discussion, it was a very brief email exchange, and Ed, for whatever reason, and I completely understand it, didn't think it was appropriate for him, the Prime Minister, or anyone else at Number 10 to discuss this issue with you, and be grateful if it wasn't raised.
The skeletons and the links tumbling out by the hour. Fresh reports that arrested deputy editor of News of the World in fact advised Cameron's media chief Andy Coulson before the 2010 elections.
We know that David Cameron is in bigger trouble than he was because somebody who was working for the Metropolitan Police was providing advice to the Conservative Party in the run-up to the general election.
Their relationship with Andy Coulson has already dented his credibility and his image. The fact that he hired a former News of the World editor who had resigned under a cloud. Andy Coulson, of course, we know has already been arrested and questioned by the police over phone hacking. So his relationship with Andy Coulson has already dented his image, but more than that, his relationship with Rebekah Brooks and Rupert Murdoch is going to come under the scanner now.
And Rupert Murdoch's admission that he visited David Cameron at his home hours after the Conservative Party winning the national polls. Details bringing the Prime Minister uncomfortably close to the wrong side of the phone hacking scandal.
So was it under the Prime Minister's direct instructions that you come in the back door?
I was asked would I please come in through the back door.
As Cameron readies to address the special session of Parliament, reports suggest that bookies are already taking bets that he will be gone permanently by the weekend.
Going as far as his resignation, no one is going there yet. People just want him to apologise and take a strong action. He's already ordered 2 inquiries, but as to what happens in the Parliament tomorrow remains to be seen.
Bureau Report, Times Now.
I think he'll be very strong and firm. We heard from the Murdochs today and from Mrs Brooks the extensive link they've had with both Labour and Conservative Prime Ministers, and frankly in the real world that's what you'd expect. The heads of media corporations, of course they meet with the heads of government, that's only to be expected. I think the Prime Minister will be incredibly strong. He is the guy that has announced an inquiry not just into News International but into the whole of the press, and hopefully we can shed some daylight on the contacts between press and politicians and move forward in a new era of relations between politics and the media. And the
questions, for instance, as to why did he appoint a former News of the World editor? The Prime Minister's answered that very clearly, saying he asked all the right questions, got all the right assurances that no wrongdoing had taken place. And the Prime Minister has now said that if he was lied to, if he, the Prime Minister, was lied to, then clearly there was also lying to a select committee and to the police, and that will clearly be part of the criminal investigation. But clearly, given that a number of people actually advised him against it, people are understandably questioning whether it was a sound judgment. But in comparison to the whole issue of phone hacking and everything else that's gone on about the tight links between some politicians and journalists and between some journalists and the police, this is, I think, a rather irrelevant issue in comparison to the big issues going on at the moment.
Rupert and James Murdoch were questioned for over 3 hours over the scandal that has engulfed the News of the World newspaper. Rupert Murdoch, during his introduction statement, called it the most humble day of his life, while his son James apologized for the scandal. But as the hours wore on, Rupert Murdoch on many occasions came across as ignorant or arrogant.
Murdoch had said in the very beginning that this was the most humble day of his life. So this may have worked in Rupert Murdoch's favour itself. But of course, the Murdochs were very, very adamant about their ignorance about the phone hacking that was rampant apparently in News of the World. And all the MPs that we've spoken to, all the press, everyone is saying that how could he not have known? And if he had not known, he did not really say that he was responsible for it. He said that he did not accept ultimate responsibility for what had been going on, all the malpractices that had been going on at News of the World.
It's a big question as to why, if News Corp executives weren't told that they weren't told, they say they weren't told. The question has to be, why not? And I think perhaps the only really unconvincing moment is when they tried to convince the committee that the News of the World was too small to notice, too small a part of the global corporation to be worthy of Rupert Murdoch's notice. It may be small in monetary terms, but it's enormous in reputational terms, and it's a flagship English paper.
Well, I thought the most extraordinary thing about Rupert Murdoch's performance was that he looked like a man who was not in control of his own company. He kept on saying that he was completely out of touch and he didn't know what was going on in different parts of the company. His son James kept on saying, I can't speak to that and I can't speak to this. And it made me worry that this is such a big global that, you know, criminals could be working for it and the chief executive, the chairman of the company, not know about it. That's bad corporate governance.
Rebekah Brooks had one advantage, if any, and that was that because Rupert and James Murdoch hearing had gone on for so long, the MPs had just 1 hour with her. We know that she was questioned for nearly 12 hours by the police on Sunday, but we don't know what she said at the police station. But what she said in front of the MPs was that she had no knowledge whatsoever of the phone hacking that had been rampant at News of the World. She professed total ignorance, which is contradicting what her subordinates are saying, which is that News of the World had a proper budget for private investigators. So the fact that she's claiming total ignorance is not really washing with neither the politicians nor with the press.
Less impressed with Rebekah Brooks, who I was deputy features editor and she'd been features editor, and she was my direct boss, and she keeps saying I knew nothing of it. Yes. And it's so disingenuous because, you know, I got my first job under Piers Morgan, and he was open about phone hacking.
But almost. He tweeted saying that he never did any phone hacking.
Oh really? Yeah, but in his autobiography he said he loved it and he got scoop of the year from a phone hack. Oh, yeah. So for Rebekah Brooks still to maintain that she knows nothing about it is not legitimate. You know, it's just nonsense. I mean, I wish someone would tell the truth, which at least Rupert Murdoch did by standing up for good investigative journalism. It helps a democracy and gets rid of corrupt politicians. That's the whole question, because in the department that I ran and she ran before me, we used a private investigator called Steve Whittemore who burnt all his records about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago now. So I think there's no evidence against me, which is why I haven't been arrested yet, and also I think there's very limited evidence against her unless she implicates herself. Now, she's not going to do that, which is why she keeps banging on about the line, I didn't know it was the reporters. But I mean, it's like a general saying, it's the soldiers, I knew nothing about it, and it's time for a boss to...
Some deniability going on. It does seem Mrs. Brooks is absolutely adamant that these things were not reported to her, and she was very consistent in her testimony to us today. It will be for the police inquiry and a court of law to determine if she was not telling the truth. I found her testimony convincing.